This is the authoring tool. The authoring tool, and again, we're talking about the design of an authoring process, a relationship process, not the specific tools or the specific icons. This deals with going to a server, going to the library, the local library on disk, or other things, like building a course map, table of contents, loading a module. Now, the design of our authoring tool, the intention of our authoring tool, is that it creates the contextual linkages between learning objectives and allows you to use all the tools you already have to create content. It then allows you to make attributions about that content in terms of how it fits into the overall field of learning material. So, for example, here, I can say, all right, this is a pretty scientific So what I've done is made the attribution that the learner interface later drives on. In other words, it's that simple to create a piece of content like this is, for example, and say, well, this is scientific keys. That creates a tag that moves with this piece of information that's invisible to the author and invisible to the learner. That means later, if the learner opens this up and looks for keys, this would fire up. Now, there's one other level. I need to get a little bit more into this. There's one other level here that would be helpful, which is, I'm sure everybody here is familiar with object-oriented programming, at least heard the phrase. Okay. We're kind of attribute-oriented. The last thing we do is load a piece of content. The last thing we do is deal with a final stage object. We deal with attributes. So, for example, every time an author creates content, we empower them to analogically make attributions about that content, that it's much more text than image-based, that it has a lot of sound or very little sound, that it's highly interactive or not interactive. Now, this is per representation, if you will, and ultimately per reference, per representation or per reference. That the content type is actual, or in the case of a network system, it's linked outside the module. That the content density is very concise, very articulate, very elaborate. Scope. How difficult it is in the overall bandwidth of the course or class or subject matter. How significant it is. That all becomes part of a mathematical word that's tagged with this particular piece of content that the interface uses to prioritize available choices whenever the learner gets into this module. In fact, let's go show that real quick on the other side. The learner has this compass setting, which kind of corresponds, not in terms of difficulty and significance, but they can set certain preferences. They can also set it to be optimal for machine performance. While I'm here, I'll explain. There's also the ability to change the size and style of the font that shows up on the screen. So just for visual, differences. There's also the ability to make a particular kind of reference a default. So, for example, if I'm doing biographical research, then I might put biography in such that whenever I click on something that's a biography, it doesn't do the quick reference two-step, it just dumps the biographical information. If I'm doing things that are multi-language, I could automatically preset for French, for example, which would mean that whenever I ask for an alternative language, it just dumps French as opposed to other alternates if they were available. So the compass setting, if you will, and that corresponds to an authoring system. And again, it's an attribution matching system. We call it rubrination. It's kind of like making the rubric align between all the different attributes of a piece of content that's got a representational or reference bias from the author's perspective, and how that fits from the learner's perspective, both in terms of what it intends to be representationally, that it's more scientific than it is a story, that it's more about the laws than it is about the beauty, and also in terms of its match mediationally, that it's more text or it's more pictures, so that we're creating this ability for the systems to tune without requiring a lot of power or intelligence to do it. Back to the authoring process. So, in addition to this process of attribution, as we just described it, a couple of other features of the authoring system. Let's take meaning. The reference process. I say meaning, okay, I want to make a reference for it. I want to see what references are available at the authoring level. Well, it says that I have a dictionary available. This is the reference tool palette. It deals with all the different types of reference issues that we've been speaking of, and it works to economize and ecologize the referencing process and all of the structural activities in the author. So, for example, when I first bring this up, I can say, wait a minute, I want to make an author's note. I'm not going to show you my fancy typing right now, but I can make an author's note and put that away, and notice that it just switched to in. Now it's in the system. Or I can say, I don't have time for it right now, but I'd like to get the roots of this word meaning. So please remind me of that, system. Or I can say, no, let's record some sound about this. Test. Okay. Meaning. And it's that simple for me now. As an author. Well, my screen's jumping all over the place. So notice these are now in. These all appear to the learner. I haven't worried about structure. I haven't worried about links. I haven't worried about any of that stuff. I've just said, I want to expand on this. And system, please remind me to do that and gather, and I'll talk about that in a minute, gather all of the support that'll help me elaborate on that later. Or, geez, it's just, seeing I'm right here, I'll make it real quick and easy, minimally distracting, minimum overhead for me to articulate a sound or make a quick sketch and forget about it. Just fold it back in there. And I don't have to worry about the structure, how it's being mediated. It's all part of the way the system takes the activity of the author, folds it into a different kind of file structure, which I hope to have time to get into, and allows the learner interface to drive through it with the qualities we've been talking about. Similarly, as an author, I may be concerned with how I want this particular meaning module, that's what we call it, by the way. It's not a page, it's not a file, it's not a database. We call it a meaning module, and we'll talk about that. It's got a very, we think, elegant internal architecture to support the way that all of these things relate without having any overheads and linkages. It's all geometrical. But the way that the system works is, let's say I want to have two texts. No, that's not right. I want to have two texts. When the learner first wakes up, and I want the second text to be did I say blah? Yeah, I said blah. So it would be something else, huh? But I can put whatever's available. Even if I just now created it or it was there before, say I'll put a friend. Let's go again to the central thread. Meaning is the activity of information. Or, wait a minute, let's do it this way.